Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Thomas Fross here with Fross and Fross Wealth Management, where we attempt to be the voice of reason in a world full of the pundits of pessimism and that scary wall of worry. As always, please make sure you read the disclosures that were attached to this video, or if you happen to be watching on social media, you can simply go to www.frossandfross.com and read any of the disclosures that you might find therein. So, as election season heats up, no doubt all of us are going to be hearing a lot of dire predictions about what will happen if either President Joe Biden or former President Donald Trump is reelected. The fact is, if history is any guide, the US economy and the stock market will most likely be just fine in the long run, no matter who's in office. What I thought I would do is just look back 44 years and let's look at some of the past presidents and some of the rhetoric that was spewed about them, and then let's see how the stock market did while they were in office. So let's start with President Reagan, Ronald Reagan. His critics said that he's a former actor, he lacks any experience to be president. Belligerence towards the Soviet Union could lead to a nuclear disaster, and they also said Reaganomics are dangerous and they will not work. And yet, despite all of that, the S&P averaged 14.2% a year while Reagan was in office. Then we have George H. Walker Bush that was elected. His critics said he's not a strong leader like Reagan. He lacks vision, and he's part of the Reagan administration that doubled the national debt. And yet, while he was in office, the S&P 500 averaged 15.7% per year. Then we have Bill Clinton. His critics said he's the governor of a small state. He's unproven on the national level. The tax increases that he talked about would sink the U.S. economy. And also a government takeover of healthcare would nationalize 20% of the U.S. economy. It'd be disastrous, and yet all of that, the S&P averaged 17.2% per year while he was in office. Then we have George W. Bush. His critics said he's running for president because of his last name, not because of any accomplishments. They said his tax cuts would only benefit the wealthy, not the overall economy. And also, he had no foreign policy experience. Now, this was a bit of an anomaly because George W. Bush inherited the White House actually in January of 2001, just months before the dot-com bubble burst, and just 8 months before September 11th that threw us into a war in Iraq. And at the end of his presidency was the financial crisis of 2007 through 2009. The S&P averaged negative 2.9% while he was in office. But was it because of his politics or because of the economy? Then we had Barack Obama, President Obama. In 2008, his critics said he's inexperienced. He had only served the U.S. Senate for 2 years before running for president. His soaring rhetoric, campaign promises were just words, and the desire for a large stimulus bill and healthcare plan would explode the national debt. And yet, despite all of that, the S&P 500 averaged 14.5% per year while he was in office. Then we have Donald Trump. We know what his critics said. Some of the things they said was that he had never held political office. He didn't speak or act in a way that was presidential. And then this trade war that he talked about starting with China would ruin the U.S. economy. And yet, despite all that, the S&P 500 averaged 16% while he was in office. And lastly, our current president, President Joe Biden, his critics said he's too old to hold office. He's a career politician. He's more of a vice president than a president. And as of a few weeks ago, during the S&P 500 has averaged 10.2% per year while he's been in office. So what's our point? Our point is, don't fret if our preferred candidate does not get elected in November. The U.S. economy and the stock market have generally marched higher through both Democratic and Republican administrations alike. Now, there are dramatic events like September 11th, the global financial crisis, COVID-19 pandemic that can cause sharp market sell-offs. But our economy and the stock market, they've historically been resilient to these types of shocks in the long run. Our other point is, don't invest based on your political affiliation or your own political feelings, because the market has been resilient in both Democrat and Republican presidencies. we should be focusing a lot more on the economy, the consumer and their spending, and what the Fed's doing to slow down inflation. That will have much more impact on the stock market over the next 4 years than what happens in November. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us here at Fross and Fross Wealth Management, 352-205-7800. And we look forward to seeing all of you very soon. Have a wonderful day.